We have with us Bikram Bedi, Country MD of Google Cloud India. Sir, thank you for speaking to PTI.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Let's start with the India market. How do you see the market for cloud services in India? How has it grown over the last few years, and the economy, as the economy itself has expanded?
I think if you look at cloud services as a segment, India is one of the fastest growing countries for Google itself, right? If you look at the kind of customers that we are working with across segments, public sector, SMB, smaller companies, medium-sized companies, large enterprises, startups, digital native companies across the board. We're working with multiple stakeholders who are essentially using Google Cloud services, and then over a period of time, this usage has been incrementally growing, right? So if you look at it, to answer your question from a market perspective, I would say that cloud has moved from being perhaps, some years ago, perhaps one of the technologies to be used, to now middle and center of the technology to use.
Are there certain sectors in India which have been the first and early adopters of cloud, but where you also see some of the other emerging sectors now, adopting cloud for their offerings, for their business needs?
See, the early adopters will always be the companies who are perhaps more agile. Think of digital native companies, startups, right? Although I'm not sure I should be calling some of them startups anymore. These are very large organizations in their own right, and they've grown significantly in India and globally. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, 90% of Gen AI unicorns now use Google Cloud, right? And 60% of all Gen AI funded companies use Google Cloud, right? So you're seeing this adoption increment, and this is up from last year. That 90% was more like 70% last year, right? So you're seeing this increased adoption that is coming across the board in that whole digital native space. The only thing is it's the journey. You may start with basic infrastructure. Over a period of time, you move to data and analytics, then you move to collaboration, you would move to, let's say, security, you would move to Gen AI. So that's the journey they would undertake, but they've been the early adopters. And as each technology evolves and becomes main stage, these companies typically would be the early adopters. Having said that, these aren't the only companies that are early adopters. You have so many companies out there which have taken this step to cloud so pretty long back, right? And they've qualified to be in the space of being early adopters. For example, some of the work that we are doing with, let's say, an HDFC Ergo, right? Now HDFC Ergo has built a center of excellence with us, which is basically around AI. They are, of course, Google Cloud. They migrated to Google Cloud earlier on, but right now they're in the midst of working with generative AI with us, and they've built this center of excellence where they essentially, they're doing various use cases, but two specific use cases I want to talk about. The first one being about their internal employees. Think about the fact that your ability to look at your customers and then decide that this is the best policy or this is the best plan for this customer cohort, right? Or internal agent productivity. I need to prepare a pitch on a certain kind of plan for a certain kind of customer, right? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is customer centricity. Now think about yourself as a customer of one of the insurance companies. When you're buying that insurance policy, there is a very large document you have to read. What if you didn't have to read that 200-page document? What if you had the ability to actually ask a question and very quickly understand what would be your coverage for, let's say, prenatal care, in terms of what percentage is covered, what time would it take for claims to get cleared, etc., etc. Customer satisfaction improves dramatically, right? So we are seeing early adopters, of course, yes, in the digital native space, but if I look at the enterprises also, Federal Bank is another great example. They've introduced this the friendly neighborhood boy, Freddy, who is your neighborhood, your friendly neighborhood person, like I said, or boy, who is your virtual assistant. And since they've been using it, and it's been a while now, since they've been using it, the virtual queries have doubled, right? the cost of running their customer care infrastructure has gone down by 50%, and their customer satisfaction index is up by 25%. So we are seeing adoption across the board, whether it's startups or as enterprises.
Indeed, some of the startups have now become a household name. That's true. Would you say that banking and financial services, healthcare, some of these sectors have been the early adopters for cloud, but now, as startups move on to the offline touch points, retail startups, for instance, or consumer tech startups, they're also looking at cloud increasingly?
See, they've always been looking at, I mean, if I look at, startups, see what has happened. You've been in the digital space where you were D2C, uh, and then you've evolved or morphed into an omni-channel strategy, right? Like I had mentioned before, most of these startups have been on the cloud journey since their infancy or birth. Now what they're doing is, as they're getting into the omni-channel space, the relevance of an organization like Google and Google Cloud starts to perhaps get even more profound, because now it's not just about running your infrastructure. Now it's about trend spotting. Now it's about customer lifetime value, right? If you're in a particular, let's say, embankment or a certain area, typically physical retail would have geographical, constraints. If you're running a large chain, you would typically, one shop or one store would serve a certain geographic location. Your ability to understand your customers better in that geography and then build for them, then build merchandise for them, then price for them, right? All of that is now starting to become a part of the technology conversation, because companies are transforming from being a pure online business to a phygital or an omni-channel business. And that is where the relevance of Google and Google Cloud starts to come in, where you start to work with these companies to say, hey, we're not just somebody who's your technology partner who will give you a good tech stack. That is table stakes. Good technology, table stakes, has to happen. But the conversation has now evolved to, what more can I do for you in some of the areas that I spoke about.
Bikram, as India looks at a vision of $5 trillion, $7 trillion economy, where do you see Google and specifically Google Cloud contributing to that?
India as a country is one of the most important countries for Google. We've been here for a while now, uh, and our mantra has been, good for India, good for Google. That is really how we think about India, right? We have large scale investments in India. We have a large employee base in India, and we are working very closely with various sectors, whether it's public sector, whether it's government, state governments, etc., or it is private organizations, startups, across the board, right? So as we look at this scale up, as we look at India moving to the next level, some of the work that we are doing, for example, this whole announcement that we made today about DPI in a box, right? It is about working with India to go global, as India takes leadership position across the world in this space of DPI and DPG, right? What India has built is world-class infrastructure. I mean, when you look at it, UPI, Aadhaar, DigiYatra, all of these and so many more. Google looks to partner with India, as India looks to take this to the world and scale, not just in terms of the internal economy, but our positioning as a world leader in the external economies of the world.
So you see Google contributing in a significant way as businesses grow in a country which is looking at big growth numbers through its cloud offerings.
Of course, we would like to be a part of growth. And again, see, this isn't just about technical infrastructure anymore. That is a key part of it. This is about being a partner in helping you with your business transformation. This is about understanding your business goals. The customers come to us with different customer problems, right? Some customers come to us and tell us, hey, how can you help me improve my customer satisfaction index, right? Some customers come to us and tell us, you know what, I'm going phygital, I'm doing the omni-channel play, I'm setting up 500 stores. How can you help me take it to 5,000 stores, right? So different customers have different business priorities depending on what space they're in. And our job as Google Cloud is to work with them, is to work with them to ensure that we can help them meet that, those business priorities by using our technology and helping them make the transformation.
Before I ask you about the big announcements that have been made today, tell me a little bit about how artificial intelligence is changing this whole equation, the length and breadth of cloud offerings, and how are you infusing AI into your cloud stack?
Sure. In fact, let me take a step back to talk a little bit about this, because I think it's important to bring the difference in play here of what Google is doing. If you look at our stack, right, think of it as a multi-layered cake. And I'll talk about some of the larger layers in that cake. Right? The first cake would typically be hardware. Right? With Google, that hardware could come from third parties, or Google has its own hardware, which is TPUs. Right? And the reason we do that is because we want to be an open platform. We want to be open for customers to adopt whichever technology they may choose, whether it's Google's technologies or it could be third-party technology. Right? On top of that comes the software or the AI layer. For us, it's the Vertex platform at Google Cloud, where you would need various. So when you're using these services, there are certain basics you would need. You would need prompt engineering, you would need billing, you would need to ensure you're secure in whatever you're using as a service, grounding, etc., etc. So there are various. So the Vertex framework will give you that. And then as you enter the Vertex framework, there is a large marketplace of models. Right? These models could be Google models, these models could be open source models, or these models could be third-party models. And again, the thought process and the vision is to say, let's be open. Because what we clearly believe is that customers are going to need multiple models. The same customer for different applications. I gave this example a little while ago as well. Let's say you're somebody in the business of retailing fruits and vegetables. You're going to need one model which is going to be specific to sorting and grading, which is vision based, your tomatoes, potatoes, onions. You're going to need one model that will help with your internal employee productivity. You're going to need another model that's going to help you with sales, Salesforce betterment, or optimizing your sales, your field force. It's not necessary the same model can do the best job across the board. You're going to need multiple models. And that's why Google is coming in with this philosophy of saying, we are going to be an open stack. We are going to allow you to use your choice. Right? And on top of that is our own first party services, which is of course utilizing our own models, but that would be things like translation, speech to text, text to speech, Google Workspace, etc., etc. Right? So that's how we're building this stack. And the reason I'm calling this out is that we are the only company that is building an integrated end-to-end stack. Most people don't have some parts of this layer. Some people are only outsourcing hardware. Some people are going and outsourcing the AI technology. See, when you outsource, you need to mark it up and sell it. Right? So you're adding price into it. Right? So because we have this whole stack end-to-end built by Google, our ability to get out there and sell the right price performance is a huge differentiator. Because as you're going for scale, as these workloads move into a scale, especially in markets like India, as you move to scale, price performance becomes a very important factor. And the fact that Google has an end-to-end integrated stack which is so open gives you the right price performance.
Bikram, big day of announcements for Google in India.
Yes.
Take us through some of these big announcements and particularly what they mean in terms of business outcomes.
Absolutely. Let's start, 4 big announcements. Right? Let's start with the first one, which is about the fact that Gemini Flash 1.5 is now going to be, in the next couple of months, is now going to be available in India. In India, which means it's going to be running, you can run, store your data, and you can at the same point in time run machine learning models for Gemini Flash 1.5 in India. Right? Why is this important? It's important because, like I said earlier, there are certain, most workloads you could use infrastructure which is global. And even if I look at India, we work with the public sector very closely. Our public cloud is certified by MATI, and a lot of the government state departments use us. However, there could be certain workloads which may not, you know, the customer may not be comfortable. Could be public sector, could be in spaces like which are regulated like financial services, right, where customers don't want to set the data overseas. So having Gemini Flash 1.5 here in India, to have your data in India and run the machine learning processes here, is our first big announcement. Right? The second big one is about this us open sourcing our AI agent framework and bringing it together with beacon enabled open networks. Now what does that really mean? What that really means is that we have come, I mean, if you look at open networks today, India has done a brilliant job. I mean, ONDC is one example. We have Honest coming in now. We have so many of these open networks. As consumers, as users, as we are using these networks, we don't want to be switching from one place to the other. I mean, I gave that example on stage of a farmer who needs information on seeds, market prices, weather information, etc., etc. You will have to keep going to different networks. What if you had the ability to look at all of that information and perhaps even transact in a single space of any app, not just one app, right? So if that app is network compliant, okay, could be Glance, could be Google Pay, could be any app, the open source AI agent framework is going to get embedded in there. Now through that you can explore the entire universe of open networks that are connected to that framework, right? So now that same farmer could very easily look for all that information we spoke about while they're in a bank. They're in the bank's app, they're looking for loans, and then they suddenly realize, oh, for me to do my loan, I need to figure out what is going to be my cost of seeds. And they can just go and look for that information through the open networks. They don't need to log off, go log on to another app, etc., etc. All of them. So this is very powerful. This is very powerful because now what you're doing is that if it's a network compliant app and it's adopting this open source framework that we are open sourcing out there for people to use and work on, then the consumer's ability to use these open networks is going to significantly jump up. You're making it more convenient for the consumers. That's the second big announcement. The third big one, I spoke about it briefly as a part of, while I was answering another question of yours, which is about DPI in a box. Again, what India has done with DPI, we are head and shoulders above most economies in the world, right? We are very proud as Indians. I mean, when you go overseas and you look at some of the DPIs that are in play in some of even the Western and the advanced countries, India is head and shoulders above that, right? And I think it's time for India to be able to help other countries in adopting these technologies to be able to rapidly scale and to do it in quick time.
And lower costs.
And lower costs versus those countries building this all out themselves. And hence we are working with the X-Step Foundation and we are putting together DPI in a box, where we are looking at all of India's DPI assets and we are saying, can we put them together on a box which could then just be exported to a certain country. So a country could come to us and say, hey, you know what, we are interested in UPI and we are interested in Aadhaar. Can you give us that? Build a great product, hand it over to them, they can plug and play and start scaling. That's the beauty of the announcement. Again, very powerful, right? And last but not least, our energy announcement, right? We've just announced, my colleague Giorgio on stage spoke about it, but we've just announced two announcements around energy and our purchase of that in India, which is advancing our goals to have sustainable energy for our own offices as well as our data centers. So 186 megawatts of clean energy. It's across two partners. One is the Adani Group and one is CleanMax, and it's going to be a mix of solar and wind in both cases. With Adani Group, it's going to be coming from the Khavda plant in Gujarat, and it's going to be operational in about a year from now. So those are our four big announcements.
Bikram, before I let you go, and I know that you do not make future projections and forecasts, but I wanted to ask you where you see Google Cloud 3 to 5 years down the line in the Indian market. What kind, as a leader, what kind of business goals are you looking at in the midterm for Google Cloud in India?
Look, our aspiration would be that in the next 3 to 5 years, we could partner with, I mean, aspirationally, I could say all, but we could partner with a large number of Indian organizations, whether it's in the startup space, whether it's enterprises, whether it's MSMEs, whether it's SMBs, public sector. We could partner with them to help them leverage technology and transform their businesses. So our aspiration is going to be that can we be the right partner for Indian companies and Indian businesses?
On that note, Bikram, thank you so much for speaking to PTI. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you. Sure. But just before that, I want to ask the team, was this okay?
There's just a close up of the hand.
No, no, not this. I was asking him, was the to be randomly telling you anything? We just make sure the right information reaches you and then we are able to back it up. Please.